In the last class, we talked about the EWS, right? And the configuration of EWS, that how we have done the configuration of a virtual machine that we have created in the EWS server, and that is called instance. So we have used a service called EC2, Elastic Computing Cloud, of the Amazon Web Services. And over there, we have created a virtual machine that is called uh, that is called instance in the AWS, and we can configure based on our requirement. That is the application of infrastructure as a service, where we will get the physical system along with the networking part, and we can get into the system using SSH, and we can enter with the help of the public IP address which is given by the instance when it is created. So those part we have seen, and we visualize that how the virtualization will take place, or how the virtual machine or virtual machine will be created into a physical machine. Now, into the continuation of that, we'll see today, and maybe in the next one classes, we'll see about the mapping of virtual machine to physical machine. That what are the different steps that will be required for mapping the virtual machine into a physical machine. It means that a physical machine is there, a physical server is there, and based on the user requirement, based on the user demand and the configuration, uh, based on the cloud service providers optimization policy, they will create the virtual machine to satisfy the requirement of the customer, and they will create these virtual machine into the physical machine. And then how these virtual machine will be mapped into the physical machine, about that we'll see in this particular topic. So you see, the cloud computing enable user to provision resources on demand, right? So this cloud computing platform gives a user that it can log into the cloud service provider's account, and then they will give the facility to choose any of the services, and you can create your resources based on your requirement. So it is a on demand resource providing, and execute application in a way that meets their requirement by choosing virtual resources that fit their application resource need. So the meaning is that based on the user requirement, cloud service provider can provide the resources. Then it becomes the task of cloud service provider to accommodate these virtual resources into physical resources, right? So once the user will configure that I need these much of RAM, I need these much of CPU, I need these much of memory, and I need that particular operating system for my virtual machine. So it will choose from the cloud, and based on the chosen requirement or the resources, the cloud service provider will provide that particular virtual machine, and that particular virtual machine will be mapped into the resource, into the physical resource. Means from the physical resource only you will configure a machine in such a way so that it will fulfill all the requirement of the customer and given to you, right? This problem means the mapping of the virtual machine into the physical resources is a fundamental challenge in cloud computing, as resource providers need to map virtual resources into physical resources, right? So it is a challenge that if your requirement is, let's say, 16 GB of RAM, and your requirement is I need 8 core of CPU, I need 40 GB of storage in that way. So it will see whether all these resources are available in a one machine or all these available are distributed. So based on that, the cloud service provider will do the configuration and make sure that your virtual machine would be ready based on the physical resources available into the premises of cloud service provider. So all these things will be taken care, and it takes into account the provider's optimization objectives, right? So how providers will also take care of their objectives. Means their objective is to utilization of the resources. Their objective are to fulfill the requirement of the customer. Their objective is to make the virtual machine such a way so that it will be more energy efficient, as well as they will make sure that the whole process will be profitable to the cloud service provider. Means they can get some profit by configuring all those resources. So all those things can be taken into account for mapping the virtual machine that is on demand by the customer or the user, as well as the physical resources that is available uh, with the cloud service provider. So this is the whole process that will be taken care. So here we have the application user applications. These application will be, it should be mapped, will be mapped with some of the virtual machines, and these virtual machine will be mapped in some of the physical machines. There is a two entity. This is virtual machine configuration manager and virtual machine placement manager. Virtual machine configuration manager will handle the virtual machine provision to assign proper resources, and virtual machine manager will handle the mapping of virtual machine into the physical machine. So virtual machine placement manager uh, has the responsibility to map a particular virtual machine to the physical machine. But before that, the configuration will take place, like how much memory is required, how much RAM is required, how much storage is required, what operating system is required, all those things. So here it will take care of optimization objective, and it will take care of the techniques. It will make the, so it will optimize the objectives of the cloud service provider, as well as it will find out the techniques, optimized technique for mapping the virtual machine into the physical machine. So the workflow will go like this. The user, let's say the application one, request the provisioning of two virtual machine. Let's assume that there is one application by the user, and that application required two virtual machine at a time for executing the application. Now, the virtual machine configuration manager assign virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2 to application 1. So it is the responsibility of virtual machine configuration manager to assign the virtual machine 1 and 2 to application 1. Now, after that, virtual machine placement manager, this one, allocate virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2 to physical machine 1. So now it will map. Who will map? The virtual machine placement manager will map the physical machine with the virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2. Means virtual machine 1 and virtual machine 2 is actually there inside the physical machine 1. So physical machine is nothing but your actual machine that exists, and virtual machine is nothing but the configured machine that is configured by the user. The resulted schedule is based on the optimization objective using optimization techniques. So it will taken care this the whole mapping will be done using the optimization objective. Means the objective should be optimized, and we have to find out the best technique. So we have to look for the optimized technique for doing this. So about that we'll see in detail in the later section of this particular slide. So first what happen is the user application are mapped into virtual machine as shown in the figure. Then virtual machine are mapped into physical machine. The two mapping phases are in principle handled by two key entities. The first one is the virtual machine configuration manager, and the second one is the virtual machine placement manager. So as we know that there is two manager which will take care of both the thing. What virtual machine will be managed by the virtual machine configuration manager, and the mapping of virtual machine with the physical machine will be taken care by the virtual machine placement manager. So the virtual machine configuration manager will deal with the issues related to provisioning the virtual machine, both in terms of their number and their size. Individual characteristics like what are the resources that are available, how many resources are available, how many virtual machines are available in that way. So as the user's choice typically plays the key role in the process. So user will decide that and configure the virtual machine. As in the last class when we discuss about the virtual machine configuration, in that point we have seen that how we it is based on us that we decide how many RAM is required, or how many memory is required, or how many uh, CPU is required. So all those things will be taken care by the user only. But the configuration inside will be done by virtual machine configuration manager. Now, after the configuration will be decided, the placement will be done by or the virtual machine will be mapped with the physical machine, or the placement of the virtual machine in which particular physical machine my virtual machine will reside, that will be decided by the virtual machine placement manager. It aims at optimizing the map of virtual machine into physical machine subject to different optimization objectives and applying different optimization technique. Now here it will look for the different objective, and it will optimize those objective which is required for the placement. Means let's say the objective are, let's say if in the physical machine, if we have let's say two physical machine, one physical machine is having let's say only 2 core of CPU, and a user required let's say 4 core of CPU. So it will be decided by the placement manager that it will give the virtual machine in physical machine 1 and 2, or both by configuring both, or it will give the configuration to the physical machine 2 which is fully available. So it depend upon the objective of that particular cloud service provider. So it will define by the cloud service provider that which type of configuration or which type of mapping it is looking for, whether it is utilizing it fully, or it will be giving the whole virtual machine into one machine, or it can give the whole virtual machine in two machines. So that is the objective will be taken care, as well as it will look for, this is the resource utilization objective. There may be the objective of energy efficiency. So what configuration I'll apply into the physical machine so that the virtual machine will be accommodated with the optimized energy consumption, as well as the cloud service provider will look for the a profit also. So which particular configuration, virtual machine configuration, if will map with this particular physical machine, is it profitable, or will provide it to other physical machine, then it will be profitable. So all these are the objective, and that will be optimized, as well as what technique will be used for mapping it. So the mapping will be also a research area, which is also called, sometime it is called load balancing. Load balancing, using the mapping of virtual machine to the physical machine. This is also a type of research optimization problem, and that problem will be taken care by using some optimization technique. So we can use any type of optimization technique to get the result. So we'll see the optimization technique what we have for balancing the load, or to scheduling the task. It is also based on that how will schedule the task of any physical machine uh, by mapping the virtual machine. So all these things we'll see one by one slowly, so that you can understand it fully. So I think you understand this particular diagram. This is how this three layers are here, and there is two configuration manager which will manage all these three layers. From the cloud provider's point of view, so if we'll take the point of view of the cloud service provider, so what user will do actually? User will just log in into the cloud service provider, choose what type of virtual machine is required. There may be the predefined way of virtual machine as we have seen in EC2. There may be some more way of putting the resources, or maybe there are other service provider which will give more easier way of configuring the virtual machine. So user has only one thing to configure their virtual machine. But if we'll take the point of view of the cloud service provider, they have lots of work to do, right? Because they are the providers, service providers. So definitely they have to do more work than the user. So if we'll take the perspective of the cloud service provider, as the workload of the resources keeps changing, as the workload of the resources keep changing, virtual machine placement should be regarded as a continuous process. Now what happen is, it is saying that workload of the resources keep changing. So there may be the a problem, like one user is coming into EC2, they have configured their system, and let's say after 2 days they have terminated uh, the instance. That may happen. Like if a user is requiring some configuration for, let's say, 1 2 days, it will do its calculation, it will do whatever it want, and then what it will do is it will terminate the system. So what will happen is, the resources will be free at that particular time. Resources will be allotted, resources may be free. So the taken care of all those things is nothing but done by the cloud service provider, that what are the resources that are free, what are the resources that are engaged. But the resources will not be engaged for a longer period of time. They may be engaged for a shorter period of time, right? So it may be the case. So that's why it says that the workload of the resources may keep changing. So the placement is the continuous process. Placement means virtual machine will be mapped with the physical machine. That process is a continuous process. Even though an initial virtual machine placement may take place every time before a new application virtual machine start using physical machine. It says that in some service provider may I have created the virtual machine, but the thing is that whenever a user will on, or user will shut down their system, the provider says that the resources are free. But maybe there may be the case that when it will turn on, or when a user will turn on their virtual machine, So maybe the configuration will take place again. So that may be the case. So what will happen is that all the time the process of the virtual machine configuration as well as placement will be done all the time if enough physical resources are or enough physical machines are not there with the cloud service providers. So let's assume that the AWS has only one server with 64 GB of RAM, 32 core of CPU, and let's say 1 terabyte of memory. Many user has entered into the AWS. They have configured their virtual machine, and now Amazon doesn't has any resources to give to new user. So what it will do, it will look for those virtual machine which are idle or which are not used by the previous user. So what it will do is it will make it free physically. Virtually it is there, but it will make it free but physically, and it will map other virtual machine with this physical machine. Virtual machine is there, it is okay in a logic, but in the physical machine it is not there. So what happened? So when the previous user who made the virtual machine idle may came and will on their system, on their virtual machine, so what will happen? So Amazon will again look for the idle machine or the some pre-configured machine physically, and then it will map the virtual machine to the physical machine. So that process will go on and on. So that is written here. Even though an initial virtual machine placement may takes place every time before a new application's virtual machine start using physical machine, this initial allocation may need to be reconsidered as the load of physical resources changes. For example, termination of some virtual machine may enable the provider to switch from resource off by moving, reallocating any virtual machine running on reutilized host. So that I'm saying the same thing which I told you, it is there. Such a resource allocation may be used, for instance, to aggregate the system's load into a smaller number of physical machines. So it says that if we have such type of reallocation policy, so with the help of a smaller physical machine, we can accommodate large number of virtual machine. Are you getting it? So this is the way, and for that, lots of work internally has to be done by the cloud service provider, and the mapping is also a problem with this type of configuration. As a result, it is useful to separate the virtual machine placement problem into two subproblems: initial placement and reallocation. So what is initial placement and what is reallocation? It may be invoked periodically according to certain triggering criteria. Regardless of this separation, the problem of virtual machine placement should be viewed as a mapping problem subject to some optimization objective. Such optimization objective may resolve around improved resource utilization, increase income, and reduce expenditure, most notably energy. Finally, different optimization technique may target different application and may be evaluated using different matrices and tools. So what it says that the problem that we have just seen, it says that the whole placement problem of the virtual machine could be divided into two subproblem. One is the initial placement, another is the reallocation. Now, what is the initial placement? Initial placement is nothing but when a new user is creating its virtual machine and start using it. That is called initial placement into the physical machine. Now, what happen is if the old user is here and the old user has shut down their system for some period of time, and again it is restarting its system. So that is called reallocation. So what will happen is that virtual machine is again reallocated to the physical machine. That is called reallocation. When the old virtual machine will be mapped with the physical machine, and when we have to map, when the old virtual machine will turn on at that particular time, and we have to do that. Initial placement is nothing but the initially configured virtual machine will be on at that particular time. This is called initial placement. The whole problem is divided into different processes that we'll see one by one. The whole mapping problem, okay, in cloud computing. So the first is the virtual machine configuration. So first is any user will come into the cloud service providers orchestration page, and it will choose which type of virtual machine it required. Then there is a virtual machine placement. In the virtual machine placement is divided into initial placement and reallocation. Initial placement is needed for the virtual machine. Just now configured virtual machine will be on at that particular time. We required initial placement. And when the old configuration will be restarted, so we required virtual machine reallocation. Then there is a optimize objective should be optimized. So we have the objective like resource utilization, monetary cost means maybe the cost related to your money and the profit, and energy efficiency, how efficiently you are managing all those configuration. And then there is a different application matrices and the tool that will be taken care in virtual machine to physical machine mapping. Now, what is this? The first one, the virtual machine configuration and the placement. The process of mapping virtual machine into physical machine involves an initial configuration phase that determines the characteristics of virtual machine, followed by a placement phase that attempt to place such virtual machine into physical machine in a cost efficient manner according to some optimization objective. So some optimization objective will be taken care to place the virtual machine into the physical machine. Getting it? Initial placement is required when the initial configuration will be done and the user want to use it. And the second is required when the old configured user has requested to restart the virtual machine. Then that virtual machine will be mapped with the physical machine again. That is called resource reallocation. So about all those things, what are the different techniques, what are the different ways to do all those things will be covered into the next class.